In this video, I'm going to show you language that you can use to write about comparisons and contrasts in English. This will be useful if you're writing a comparison or contrast essay, or comparison contrast paragraph, or any time that you're writing in order to describe similarities or differences between two things. I'm going to show you the grammar of comparisons. I'll also show you some very useful phrases that you can use in a comparison contrast essay or paragraph. And I'll also show you some transition words that you can use for comparisons and contrasts. Along the way, I'll show you some common mistakes that I have seen students make many times, and I'll show you how to avoid these in your writing. For my examples, I'm going to be comparing two cities which are pretty different. Houston, Texas, and Holland, Michigan. I'm going to talk about their differences and some similarities as we go through. So first we'll start with the grammar. The grammar of comparisons. When we compare two things, like two cities, often we're going to use comparative adjectives. And there are two main structures that we use for forming comparative adjectives. If the adjective is short, we're going to add ER to the end of it. So for example, small, smaller. I'm going to make a sentence like this. Holland is smaller than Houston. I added ER to the word small, and then I need to use a very important word. That's the word than. I use the word than when I'm including those two things I'm comparing in the sentence. Holland is smaller than Houston. I can also use the word hot. I can say the weather in Houston is hotter than in Holland. So both these words, small and hot, these are one-syllable adjectives, so the comparative structure is formed by adding ER to the end of it. Now there's a spelling change you might notice here with hot. I added an extra T. And that's because hot, it's a short, one-syllable adjective, and it ends with consonant, vowel, consonant, H-O-T. When we have any word like this, a one-syllable adjective ending in consonant, vowel, consonant, we are going to double the last consonant, in this case it's letter T, before we add ER. Another example here is large, larger. So large ends with an E. I don't have to add ER, I'm just adding R so that the ending is now an ER ending. Large, larger. And here in my sentence, I will make it like this. Houston has a larger population than Holland. Population is a noun, and I'm not going to change the form of a noun. This comparative structure, that's just for adjectives, like small, hot, large, and large is going to go in front of my noun. Larger population. And again, I'm going to use that very important word, than. So let's look at what we do with our longer adjectives. I told you there were two structures. ER was for the short adjectives. For the long adjectives, we will use more. So if I have a word like international, that's an adjective, then I just leave it as it is, international, and I use the word more in front of it, like this. International, more international. Houston is more international than Holland. This is Holland, Michigan. Houston is more international than Holland. And again, I'm using that very important word, than, in my construction. Here's another word, another adjective which is very long, cosmopolitan. This is another adjective similar to international, which means that there are people from many different places here. And so again, I'm not going to change the word cosmopolitan, this long adjective, but to make the comparison, I'm going to add the word more right in front of it. And I wrote a sentence like this. Houston is much more cosmopolitan than Holland. So I wanted to tell you that the difference between these two cities is very, very big, so I included the word much in front of more in my comparison. This is optional. I'm using this word because, like I said, I want to tell you that the difference is really a big difference. So I added much to emphasize this. Much more cosmopolitan. Now, a lot of students make a mistake like this. Houston is much cosmopolitan than Holland. Remember, much, this is an optional word here to show that the difference is a big difference, but more, that word is an essential part of your construction. You have to include it when you're making a comparison like this using a long adjective. Now we can also use more in front of nouns, and this can be very useful when you're writing and you don't want to use an adjective, but you want to say that there's more of something, like this. Houston has more professional sports teams than Holland. Houston has several professional sports teams. I'm actually not sure if Holland has any, but Houston has a few. So Houston has more professional sports teams than Holland. Don't forget than. Or how about this one? Houston has much more traffic than Holland. Again, I'm using much because I wanted to tell you that this difference is a really big one. There is more natural beauty in Holland than in Houston. So again, I'm using more in front of my noun phrase here, natural beauty. And don't forget about this construction, there is. That is always a useful one if you're going to be describing places and you want to say that something is there, exists in this place. Another construction that we use when we are comparing things is as. If we just use as, it means that something is equal. But most of the time, I've noticed we really use it when we're talking about when something is not equal, and we use not as, like here. Holland is not as big as Houston. In other words, Holland is smaller than Houston. So I'm saying this in a different way. Holland is not as big as Houston. The important thing with this construction you need to remember is you're going to use as twice. As big as. How about this? There are not as many cars as in Holland as there are in Houston. When I'm using as, I do need to use an adjective. Could be big, or the word many functions this way here. There are not as many cars in Holland as there are in Houston. If I want to talk about the similarities between places or some characteristic that is shared, a very good word to use is both. So like this. There are fun things to do in both cities. It means like the two. I could say there are fun things to do in the two cities, but more commonly we will use the word both to express this. Both cities have great restaurants. In my example, I used both in front of nouns, but we can also use both in front of adjectives. I could say the cities are both fun. The two cities are both a lot of fun. Also, another useful phrase is the same, like this. We speak the same language in both places. So the same comes right in front of a noun, language. Or these two cities are not in the same time zone. We don't make a sentence like this. These two cities are not the same hot. I see this mistake a lot. Hot is an adjective, so you will not use the same right in front of an adjective. We'll use it in front of a noun. The same language or the same time zone. So now let's look at a few phrases that you can use to help organize the things that you are comparing in your essay or your paragraph. How about this? The first difference is the size. If I'm going to be listing differences, I might start with a phrase like this. The first difference is the size. So notice that I'm using is, and then after that I do have a noun. If I want to make a longer phrase, then I'm going to make it like this. One difference, or it could be the first difference, those are equal. One difference is that Houston is larger than Holland. So I can begin my sentence with the first difference or one difference, and then I need to use the word is, and then I have the option. I can finish with a noun, the first difference is size, or I can finish with a whole subject-verb clause, that Houston is larger than Holland. And both of those are really nice ways to introduce your point. How about this? This is really another way to say the same thing in case you're looking for some different language. The first difference between the two cities is their size. And here's a mistake that I see a lot. There are two things wrong with this one. The first difference, comma, Houston is bigger than Holland. Okay, first of all, I don't need a comma. And secondly, I do need the word is. It should be the first difference is Houston is bigger than Holland. And to make something even more clear when you write, we often use the word that. The first difference is that Houston is bigger than Holland. And this is a really nice way to write this sentence. Now, if we're going to go on and continue listing points of comparison, we can make them like this. The second difference is the weather. Or I might say another difference is the weather. This is like an additional difference, but I'm not specifically naming if it's difference number 2, difference number 3, difference number 4. Another difference, like one more difference, is the weather. But you hopefully will not write a sentence like this. Another difference, weather. There are a number of problems here, but the most important problem here is you need to use is. This sentence doesn't have a verb. Another difference is the weather. When you're adding additional points and they're continuing along the same idea, you can use the word also, like this. Also, comma, the weather is different. The weather is also different. Also can be placed in different. The word also can be placed in different parts of the sentence. How about this? The weather is also different in Houston than in Holland. But this is a sentence that it might sound right, but it actually isn't right. It's not correct when you write it down like this. Also, comma, the weather. So remember, we always need a verb here. So it's something like this. The first sentence would be a much better way to write this. Also, comma, the weather is different. And now let's look at some transition words that you can use between sentences or between ideas when you're talking about your similarities or your differences in your writing. So the first one, whereas. This is kind of a formal one, and this word shows a contrast between two ideas, like this. Whereas Houston has a large population, comma, not many people live in Holland. So I have two different ideas. Houston has a large population. Holland doesn't. Not many people live in Holland. I'm combining these two ideas into one sentence with the word whereas, which signals that there's this contrast. And I'm also going to use a comma separating the two ideas. Here's another example with whereas. Whereas Holland has 4 distinct seasons, comma, it is hot in Houston for most of the year. So again, these are two different ideas. Holland has 4 seasons. One is hot, one is cold, 2 are in between. But Houston doesn't. Houston has one hot temperature, more or less. So I'm combining these two contrasting ideas using the word whereas, like this. Whereas Holland has 4 distinct seasons, comma, it is hot in Houston most of the year. I can also use whereas in the middle of a sentence after a comma. Holland gets a lot of snow every year, comma, whereas it almost never snows in Houston. I can use the word while really in the same way as whereas. So now you kind of have two words with the same structure that you can easily use. While there is a lot of traffic in Houston, comma, traffic is not a big problem in Holland. Or how about this? There's not a lot of natural beauty in Houston, comma, while Holland is located on beautiful Lake Michigan. So these two ideas are different. One, there's not a lot of natural beauty in one place. Number two, there is a lot of natural beauty. It's on the shore of this gorgeous lake. I'm connecting these two different ideas into one sentence with the word while. While is that connecting word which shows the relationship between these two ideas. And the relationship is that they're kind of opposite. And notice that I used while here after a comma. There are different uses of while, but the way that I'm using in this sentence, it does get a comma in the middle, right before while. Okay, we have just a couple more, and these two words are useful. The first one when you want to show a difference, and the second when you want to show that things are the same. So with unlike, I could use it like this. Unlike Houston, Holland has a lot of natural beauty. So this one I have the word unlike, and then I just have my noun, unlike Houston, comma. And in the second example, like Houston, comma, Holland has many interesting things to do. So it's pretty simple to use this word. You just are going to use your word, unlike or like, and then your first place, your noun, like unlike Houston, and then I'm going to make the sentence showing the opposite. Holland has a lot of natural beauty. And here's another word I can use to connect two ideas. Here I'm going to show that things are similar. That means almost the same, but not exactly. And I'll use it like this at the beginning of a sentence. There are many things to do in Holland. Stop. End of sentence. Next sentence. Similarly, comma, Houston has a lot of attractions. So I'm connecting these two ideas. I'm going to leave them in separate sentences, but I'm going to connect the ideas from one sentence to the next using the word similarly. And after similarly, I will use a comma. I have seen a lot of mistakes like this one, and I want you to avoid it. So similarly Holland, you don't need Holland, just similarly, comma, Houston has a lot of attractions. And the last one is in contrast. So let's look at this example. There is not much traffic in Holland. Stop, end of sentence. In contrast, the traffic in Houston is terrible. So just as we looked at before in the last example, many times students will make mistakes like this. They're going to say in contrast Holland, but don't do that. Just in contrast, comma, the traffic in Houston is terrible. So we have learned a lot here, and I hope that these things are going to be useful for you in your comparison and contrast writing. We talked about different grammar structures that you can use for adjectives like er, more, or as. We looked at a couple of vocabulary words, both and the same. We looked at some different phrases that you can use as you're introducing different points of comparison. The first difference, another difference, also. And we looked at some words that you can use to transition between different ideas, like whereas for contrast, while for contrast, in contrast, unlike, and then to show similarities, we looked at like and similarly. So I hope that this was helpful for you. If you've got any questions about how to use these words and phrases, go ahead and leave me a note in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer you. If this is useful for you, consider subscribing to our channel because we've got new videos every week. And remember to turn on your notifications so that you don't miss a thing. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.